Leo, are you really going to leave? Maria, our housekeeper, finally asked, her voice laced with a sigh she'd been holding back. I was packing the last of my things from the house I once called home. I'm tired, Maria. Worn out. My heart's dead, I said calmly, folding a shirt. Besides, I never really belonged here, did I? But, Maria started, then let the word hang in the air, another sigh escaping her. I knew what she couldn't understand. For 7 years, I had poured my blood, sweat, and tears into this family. It cost me my parents, who died far too young, and it cost me a piece of myself, my leg. Why would I just walk away from it all now? I used to wonder the same thing about Chloe. I loved her so much, so why was she so cruel to me? I finally understood the day I saw her. The day she fell back into the arms of her childhood sweetheart. The same man who had shattered her heart and abandoned her when she needed him most. The answer was simple, really. She just didn't love me. Before boarding the plane, I sent one last text. You're free now? I hope we never see each other again. The plane broke through the clouds, and I took one last look down at the city that held 13 years of my memories, from college to my career. There were good times, happy moments, but they were drowned out by an ocean of pain and sorrow. I deleted every photo, every contact connected to that city. I snapped my SIM card in half and dropped it into a trash can. From now on, the people and the life I had there would have nothing to do with me. My hometown was a quiet little town in rural Oregon, a world away, requiring a connecting flight. While waiting in the terminal, a little girl about my son's age sat down next to me. Her cheeks were rosy, and she was quiet, just sitting there, occasionally glancing at me with wary eyes. Her guardian, a woman in her 50s dressed in simple clothes, struck up a conversation. She was a natural chatterbox, but I wasn't in the mood. I gave a few short answers before putting on my headphones and closing my eyes, letting the music drown everything out. Sometime later, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I opened my eyes and looked at the woman. Young man, I just need to run to the restroom, she said. Would you mind keeping an eye on my granddaughter for a minute? You help people out when you're traveling. It's just what you do. I thought for a moment, then nodded. She thanked me profusely, told the little girl to be good and listen to me, and then walked off. The girl was an angel, sitting perfectly still beside me without a word, her grape-like eyes darting around the terminal. But my boarding call came, and the woman still hadn't returned. That's when I noticed she had taken all her luggage with her when she'd left for the restroom. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. I had a hunch, a terrible one. I called over airport security. They checked the surveillance footage, and, sure enough, the woman never went to the restroom. She had walked away from me and hurried straight out of the airport, glancing back nervously as if she was afraid of being followed. My suspicion was confirmed. This little girl had been intentionally abandoned. The area around us erupted in whispers and gasps. People condemned the grandmother's heartlessness, murmuring about how pitiful the little girl was. The child seemed to understand what was happening. She didn't cry or make a sound, but a film of tears welled up in her eyes. She just stood by my side, her tiny hand gripping the hem of my jacket for dear life. I let out a silent sigh and knelt, looking into the eyes of this little girl who was fighting so hard to hold back her tears. Hey there, I said softly. Would you want to come home with me? The little girl stared at me for a few seconds, then threw her arms around my neck. The dam broke, and tears streamed down her face, pattering against my shoulder. Life is full of strange ironies. One minute, I was leaving a city of heartbreak, completely alone. The next, I had a child. I left my old life with nothing but a few changes of clothes. I didn't take a dime. I sold the few pieces of jewelry my mother had given me for my wedding, which was just enough to rent a small apartment in my hometown. After that, I was nearly broke. With my bad leg, finding a steady job was impossible. I had no choice but to take on gig work, doing DoorDash, running errands on TaskRabbit, anything to keep us afloat. The little girl was small, but she understood everything. No matter how late I came home, she would be the first to greet me, slippers in hand. Then she'd rush to get a basin of hot water for me to soak my feet. She kept the apartment spotless, and when I was sick in bed, she'd stand on a little stool to make me soup and brew my medicine. It made me think of that other child, the one who wasn't my blood but who I'd nearly died to save. Mason Preston. He'd see nights on TV and demand I get on all fours to be his horse. If he got tired of walking, I had to carry him, and if I wasn't walking fast enough, he'd yank my hair. They really were nothing alike. This little girl was so perceptive it broke my heart. Seeing how hard I struggled, she asked me one day, with red-rimmed eyes, why I had taken her in when her own parents and grandparents didn't want her. I stroked her hair. Because I didn't want to be alone, I told her. I was scared of being lonely. She looked at me for a long time, then said with the utmost seriousness that she would stay with me forever. She would study hard, make a lot of money, buy me a big house, and take care of me. And so the days passed, one by one. We were a two-person family, and while life was tough, it was warm. The only thing that worried me was that she was always so quiet and serious, like a little adult with the weight of the world on her shoulders. I named her Joy, hoping she might find some. 5 years flew by. Joy was in elementary school now. She was still quiet, but she was a brilliant student, loved by all her teachers. With the money I'd saved, I opened a small cafe and bake shop. Life was stable. Joy and I were content. When she wasn't in school, she'd do her homework at a table in the shop. When I got busy, she'd help out, clearing tables or greeting customers. She was diligent and sweet. Regulars would often tell me how lucky I was to have such a wonderful daughter, and that I'd be happy in my old age. I didn't have to wait until I was old. I was happy now. I often felt a surge of gratitude that I had found Joy that day. She saved me from my loneliness and gave my life a purpose. Dad! The voice came from behind me as I was cleaning the shop. But it wasn't Joy, who was sitting at the counter doing her homework. I turned. Standing in the doorway was a woman, familiar and yet a stranger, holding the hand of a little boy who was a head taller than Joy. 5 years. I never thought I'd see Chloe Preston again. The little boy, dressed smartly in a little blazer and bow tie, saw me turn. He let go of his mother's hand and ran toward me. I sidestepped him gently. Mason stumbled, then tried to hug me again, but I softly pushed him away. Hey, little man, you've got the wrong person. I'm not your dad. Then, I lifted my gaze to meet the woman's eyes. Welcome, I said, my voice flat. What can I get for you? Maybe it was because 5 years had been long enough for my heart to turn to stone, or maybe I just let it all go. Seeing the woman I once would have died for, I felt nothing. Dad, it's me, Mason. What's wrong? Don't you recognize me? He asked, his face crumpling. He burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Chloe walked in and took her son's hand, her eyes fixed on me, saying nothing. The kid hadn't changed. When he didn't get his way, he threw a fit. Dad, why are you pretending you don't know me? He wailed. Don't you want me anymore? Chloe just stood there, watching me, not stopping him. I sighed. Joy, can you get this young man a hot chocolate? Joy, ever the sharp one, understood everything. She didn't say a word, just put down her pencil and went to make the drink. I looked at Chloe. Can we talk? Outside. The first time I saw Chloe was when I left my small mountain town to attend college in the Bay Area. She was a sophomore, vice president of the student government, tall and beautiful, with an effortless grace. She was leading a group of orientation guides for us freshmen, and the moment I saw her, I was completely captivated, just like every other guy there. She wore a flowing white dress, her long hair blowing in the breeze, and her smile was like sunshine. She was the girl every guy dreamed of, and I was no exception. My heart was gone in that instant. But she came from a wealthy family and had a boyfriend, her childhood sweetheart, who was in her year president of the student government, and just as handsome and accomplished as she was. That knowledge was a bitter pill for all of us who admired her from afar, including me. It felt hopeless, but I couldn't let go. I did everything I could to get closer. I joined the student government, signed up for the club she was in, and made sure to be wherever she was. All just to catch a glimpse of her, to breathe the same air. But every time I saw her holding hands with him, my heart ached with a familiar loneliness. Still, I stubbornly held on to my secret crush, even after she graduated and left. I thought she would just be a beautiful, painful memory, the biggest regret of my life. But then, things took an unexpected turn. 6 months later, she came back to campus representing her company at a career fair. I was ecstatic. I applied immediately, and, miraculously, I passed the interview. By then, I wasn't that naive freshman anymore. I knew we were from different worlds, and I didn't dare dream of winning her heart. I just wanted to be near her, to work with her. That would be enough. Internship, performance review, full-time employee. I buried my love and worked quietly by her side. I had achieved my goal. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. Just when I thought this was how things would be, content in my quiet devotion, the company suddenly faced a catastrophic crisis. Employees were poached by rivals or left, seeing no future. In a single month, everyone was gone. Everyone except me. Even her childhood sweetheart had vanished. I don't know where I found the courage, or maybe it was just a foolish fantasy driving me to do something crazy. Without a second thought, I chose to stay. I would be the man who helped her rebuild from the ashes. When the ship started sinking, everyone jumped overboard. She had asked me then, "Why are you willing to stay?" I avoided her eyes and lied, telling her I believed in the company, that I believed in her, that everything would be okay. Just like that, I became her only employee. We pulled all-nighters rewriting business proposals. We got screamed at by clients together. We hid from debt collectors in her car for an entire day, only to be dragged out and beaten. I took the worst of it, trying to protect her, and ended up with 3 broken ribs. To land a crucial client, I, a man with a chronic stomach condition who couldn't drink, forced down an entire bottle of whiskey. I was hospitalized with a perforated ulcer. During that time, to save the company, to save the woman I loved, but had never confessed to, I gave everything I had. And that wasn't all. I cashed out my parents' life savings, took out a mortgage on their house, and borrowed from every friend and relative I could. I poured it all into the company. One day, she showed me an ultrasound photo and asked if I would be willing to give this child a real family. I didn't have to ask. It was that bastard's child. Maybe it was the lingering obsession from my college days, or maybe everything I had done, staying, fighting, bleeding, was all for this one moment. I only hesitated for a second before I said yes. And so, I married into the Preston family. Because the family was still on shaky ground, I brought my parents over. Our 2 families had a quiet dinner together, and that was our wedding. On our wedding night, she stumbled into our room, drunk. She threw her arms around me, sobbing, screaming at me for being a heartless bastard, for abandoning her and her child at her darkest hour. That was the night I truly understood. In her heart, she had never let go of Dylan Vance. The November air had a bite to it. Stepping out of the cafe, I instinctively hunched my shoulders. I stopped at the curb, and Chloe stopped with me, just watching me. "What have you been telling Mason all these years?" I asked, getting straight to the point. She frowned, confused. "We've been apart for 5 years," I said softly. "I'm not his biological father, and he used to hate me. He wouldn't have any feelings for me now unless someone was constantly talking about me in his ear." I paused. "By the way, did you and Dylan ever get married?" Chloe was silent for a moment. I didn't say anything. It was Maria. She was always telling him stories about you. Maria. I pictured her kind face. She was the only person in that house who ever treated me with respect. Thinking about my time, there left a bitter taste in my mouth. I waved a dismissive hand. "Forget it. I don't care why you've suddenly shown up after 5 years. I just want to say that we were just passing strangers in each other's lives. You've seen me. Now, take him and go home." Chloe's mouth opened, as if to say something, but she held back. Instead, she pulled out a credit card and held it out to me, her face etched with guilt. "I'm sorry. Back then, the company was built by both of us. This is your share." When I'd asked for a divorce, offering to leave with nothing, she had signed the papers without a word. 5 years later, she was telling me I deserved a share of the business. The irony was suffocating. Of course, I wouldn't have taken the money then, and I wouldn't take it now. I considered it tuition for a life lesson. I shook my head, my expression indifferent. "No, thanks. I'm doing fine on my own, and I don't want any connection to my past." I met her eyes. "I think you know what I mean." Chloe flinched as if struck. Her eyes welled up and she shot back in a low, angry voice. "Leo, do you hate me that much? Hate me so much you don't want anything to do with me?" Just then, Mason's furious voice erupted from inside the cafe. "You little brat. You're a thief. You stole my dad, and now you're going to give him back." By the time I got inside, Joy was doing what she always did. Less talk, more action. She had Mason pinned against the wall. Her shirt, however, was soaked with hot chocolate. Seeing me, Joy obediently let Mason go and quietly started dabbing at her shirt with a napkin. "Dad, can we go home? Please? I know I was wrong." Mason ran over, crying, and wrapped his arms around my waist, looking up at me with pitiful eyes. I reached out and patted his head, smiling down at him. "You know, I'm not really your dad. It takes a special kind of courage to raise your wife's child with her ex-lover. Maybe it was an extension of my love for her, but from the moment I agreed to give him a family, I treated Mason as my own. When he had a high fever in the middle of the night and we couldn't get a cab, I carried him on my back for miles in the freezing cold to the hospital, where I stayed by his bedside for 3 days without sleep. When he craved a specific type of artisanal cupcake from a bakery across town, I spent a whole day in the sweltering summer heat searching for it. When he was little, Mason was so attached to me. He wouldn't sleep unless I told him a story. He had to be carried whenever we went out. If I was out of his sight for a moment, he'd cry for his dad. That dependence was my only comfort after the Preston family got back on its feet. Chloe grew distant. Her family treated me with contempt. And through all that humiliation, Mason's affection was my only solace. But then, somewhere along the line, he started to resent me, to despise me. I couldn't figure out what had happened. Until one day, he was misbehaving, and I got so angry I spanked him a few times. He glared at me and shouted, "You're just a butler they hired to look after me. What gave you the right to hit me?" Dylan is my real dad. It was only then that I understood why Chloe had started dressing up so glamorously every day, why she was always taking Mason out by herself. Her childhood sweetheart was back. In the end, Chloe left, dragging a reluctant, backward-glancing Mason with her. I figured it was just a childish whim, that he'd give up now that he saw I didn't care for him anymore. I didn't give it another thought. But 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Mason walked into my shop with his backpack on. "Dad, I've come to live where you live." I stared at him, stunned. I instinctively looked up, but Chloe's car was nowhere in sight. I only saw a luxury sedan pulling away from the curb. Half an hour later, Joy came home from school and told me Mason had transferred to her school and to her class. "Dad, I don't like him," Joy said, frowning at Mason, who was doing his homework quietly in a corner. She lowered her voice. "Can I just beat him up and make him leave?" My daughter, though only 10, was as serious as an old soul. She rarely said such childish things. I was curious. "Why do you want to beat him up?" "Because he and his mother hurt you," Joy said calmly. "I can't beat up the big one, so I'll have to beat up the little one." I was speechless. I had never told anyone about what happened. How could she possibly know? "I saw the look in your eyes when you looked at them," she explained. "It was sad and hurt." I was stunned again. I hadn't even noticed those fleeting emotions in myself, but she had caught them instantly. I guessed at the daughter's love for her father. I remembered Chloe once pointing a finger at my face and sneering, "The only reason you stuck by my side, risking everything, was to gamble on a future where you could finally climb out of your social class. A person like you doesn't deserve love," she had said, "and you're destined to never be loved." "You were wrong, Chloe. My parents love me. My daughter loves me. And now, I finally love myself. I am happy." I let the driver drop Mason off at my shop every day. The boy was smart. After that first tantrum, he was incredibly well-behaved. He would sit in a corner and do his homework, and when I was busy, he would awkwardly try to help. It must have been difficult for the little prince. I didn't know what Chloe was up to, and I couldn't be bothered to figure it out. She would stop by occasionally, sit for a while without a word, and then leave with Mason. This went on for months. I had to admit, Mason had grown up. He endured months in this small town with no amusement parks and no McDonald's, all just to win my affection. The old Mason never would have lasted a day. Maybe it's human nature to want what you can't have, even for a child. The more indifferent I was, the more he wanted the dad from his early childhood back. But he didn't know. The dad he remembered died a long time ago. It was a stormy afternoon. Mason stubbornly wanted to play in the rain, and I dragged him back inside, afraid he'd catch a cold. He thrashed in my arms, screaming, "You're garbage. You're a shameless thief who stole my dad from my mom. What right do you have to tell me what to do? Get out of my house." He struggled and yelled, biting my arm. In that split second of pain, when my grip loosened, he bolted out the door. I ran after him. We raced onto the road. The rain was a torrential downpour. A car, unable to brake in time, was skidding straight for him. I didn't have time to think. I lunged forward and threw myself over him. When I woke up, I was in a hospital. The doctor said I'd been in a coma for 7 days, and it was a miracle I was alive. But my left leg would be permanently disabled. Mason had only suffered a few scrapes. When I woke up, Maria brought him to see me. She told him I'd almost died saving him, that my leg was ruined, and that he needed to be a good son to me from now on and stop saying cruel things. I vaguely remember Mason tilting his chin up, his face a mask of cold indifference. "He's just a butler paid to look after me," he sneered. "He's not worthy of my respect. I didn't ask him to save me. Serves him right for getting hit. Oomph. God must be blind. Why didn't the car just kill him? Only when he's dead can my real dad come back to us. Only then can our family be whole again." Of course, even to this day, I don't hate him. What does a child know? He was only repeating the hatred someone else had been pouring into his ear. To me, he was just a special customer. He paid for his food and drinks. Beyond that, I didn't care. He could come and go as he pleased. I often wondered when he would finally get tired of this act, of trying to win back a father's love. When would he give up and go back to being the precious little prince of the Preston family? His presence was a constant, grating annoyance. Then one day it happened. I was closing up the shop for the night and realized Mason had never shown up. He must have lost his patience, I thought. He finally understood that I would never be his father again and had gone back to his life in the city. I locked the shop door and took Joy's hand, ready to head home. As I turned, I saw 2 figures standing across the street by a luxury car. One tall, one small. "Mom, when will Dad forgive me?" "Soon, sweetie. Just keep trying. He'll forgive you, and he'll come home with us. Today is his birthday. You even made him a cake. He'll be so happy." Mason clutched a small, elegantly wrapped box, nodding emphatically, his face lit with anticipation. When he saw me, he darted across the street, Chloe following close behind. Dad, happy birthday. Mason's face was flushed, maybe from the early summer heat, or maybe from sheer excitement. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with hope. Chloe stepped forward, her mouth opening and closing as if she didn't know what to say. Finally, she managed happy birthday. I looked at her calmly and said in a low voice, "Today isn't my birthday. The Leo you knew died on his 27th birthday." The color drained from Chloe's face. Mason was just a child. His hatred and his curses weren't the main reason I left. The final straw was Chloe. When my parents first learned I was going to marry into the Preston family, they asked if I was sure. They warned me that even though the family was struggling then, they were once prominent. The differences in our backgrounds would make my life there incredibly difficult. But I was naive. I believed that because Chloe and I had been through so much together, my love for her and our little family would be enough to overcome any obstacle. And with that, I set myself on a path from which there was no return, beginning 5 years of a bitter and heartbreaking marriage. Our relationship didn't get any closer after we were married. We were both consumed by work, leaving early and coming home late. Most of our conversations were about the business. Out of a sense of wifely duty, perhaps, she showed some concern for me, but I never felt an ounce of love in it. Still, I foolishly believed that if I just tried hard enough, if I was considerate enough, I would eventually win her over. So I debased myself, trying every way I knew to please Chloe, to please every single member of her family. But as time went on, especially after the family business recovered, my efforts yielded nothing. In fact, things got worse. Chloe remained hot and cold, and her family's disdain for me became more overt. In their minds, they were high society, and I was just some low-born trash from the countryside. A cripple, no less. Sometimes I wanted to give up, especially when Mason would scream at me that I wasn't his father, that a cripple like me didn't deserve to be his dad, that I should get out of his house. But I couldn't let go. I was still clinging to the fantasy that one day I might occupy a small corner of Chloe's heart, even if she never forgot Dylan. It wasn't until my parents died that I finally understood. It had all been in my head. In the 4th year of our marriage, I got a call from a neighbor back home. My parents, whom I hadn't seen in over a year, had been in a car accident and were clinging to life. I told Chloe my parents were dying and asked her to come with me. Her reply was ice cold. "I have an important client meeting. I can't go." I went alone, crying the entire way. When I got to the hospital, the doctor told me to say my goodbyes. My mother had been holding on by a thread, waiting for me. My father, he never got to see me one last time. Just the day before, my mom had called. She had pleaded with me, telling me that if things were too hard, I should just come home. She and Dad were waiting for me. I could hear my dad sighing in the background. I had forced a smile into my voice and told them they were imagining things, that I was very happy. And now, just one day later, we were saying goodbye forever. On the hospital bed, my mother's face was ashen. She gripped my hand tightly, as if letting go would mean losing me for good. "Leo, my son," she whispered, "I know you haven't been happy since you got married. You only said you were to keep us from worrying." She raised a trembling hand to stroke my hair, her eyes filled with a deep, aching love. "It's all my fault. I knew you wouldn't be happy marrying into that family, but I didn't stop you." Tears streamed down her face. "My son," she sobbed, "what will you do now? All alone with your injury. With no one to love you or take care of you. What if people bully you? I can't bear to leave you." I held my mother and wept until I couldn't breathe. She stroked my head, her own tears falling, just as she had when I was a boy. Her eyes were filled with a profound reluctance to let me go. But in the end, she left me. She left this world full of regret. I held her body and screamed, my voice raw with grief, until I passed out. Later, our neighbor told me that right before the accident, my mother had been on the phone with someone, and they had been arguing. Shortly after, my parents had frantically called for a car to leave, and that's when it happened. I found my mother's phone. The last call on her log was from Chloe. My parents must have been coming to find me. After I buried my parents, my eyes dry of tears, I returned to the Preston house. I confronted Chloe, my voice shaking with rage, demanding to know what she had said to my mother to cause the accident. I didn't even need to ask. I knew they had been arguing about me. I just needed someone to blame. Chloe sneered at me. "What do you think? Your mother is just as greedy as you are. You have everything you could ever want now, and still she wanted me to treat you better. How much better do you want me to treat you? Should I put you on a pedestal and worship you like a god?" At that moment, years of pin-up resentment exploded. "Chloe, what the hell are you talking about? How am I greedy?" I roared. "I stayed by your side and bled for you when everyone else abandoned you. I sold my parents' house, went into debt, and poured every last cent our family had into your company. You said you wanted to give your child a stable home, and without a second thought, I agreed to raise another man's son. And what did I get in return? Your contempt. You call me greedy. In 5 years of marriage, you never once called me your husband. All I ever wanted was a little bit of your love, a little bit of respect from your family. Is that being greedy? Chloe looked at me, my wild-eyed fury, with a dismissive curl of her lip. The sarcasm dripped from her voice. Don't paint yourself as some kind of saint. The only reason you stayed, the only reason you married into my family, was to gamble on a new life, a way to climb out of your pathetic social class. It's a common trait among men like you, clawing your way out of the gutter. You'll do anything to get ahead, and I just needed a father for my child. I didn't want him to have a broken home. It was a transaction. We both got what we wanted. Now, your wish has been granted. You can enjoy the wealth and privilege of the Preston family. But as for my love, you will never have it. That belongs to Dylan. Her words struck me like lightning. I stood there, frozen. So that's what it was. My sacrifices, my devotion, my decision to marry her. In her eyes, it was all just a calculated bet for a life of luxury. The cruelest irony was that after everything I had done for her, for Mason, she still looked down on me. She still loved the man who had hurt her, who had abandoned them both. That day was my 20th birthday. Maybe because everything was out in the open, Chloe became even more shameless. She started taking Mason on dates with Dylan. When they came back, Mason would call me trash, a loser, screaming that I had stolen his real dad and that I should get out. The rest of the family also started dropping hints, openly suggesting Chloe should divorce me and get back together with Dylan to give the boy a real family. I knew what they were thinking. A low-class cripple from the countryside wasn't good enough for their high and mighty family. They conveniently forgot that this loser was at least half the reason their precious family was standing on its feet again. Chloe's heart, her actions, they killed the last bit of hope I had. I tried to detach, to live my own life within that house, ignoring them all. But I didn't feel free. I just felt empty. And every time I saw her bring Dylan into our home, a part of me twisted in agony. After a few months of that hell, I decided to set her free, and to set myself free. Dad's birthday is on this day, the same day as mine. Joy's voice pulled me back to the present. She was pointing at a date circled in red on her digital watch. Mason knew how much I adored Joy. Afraid of angering me, he didn't argue with her, just looked at me with those pleading eyes. Chloe stood beside him, paralyzed with indecision. She was probably remembering everything she'd done to me. Her eyes were wet, her lips parted as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I'm sorry, she finally stammered, summoning her courage, but I cut her off. You and I ended things 5 years ago. You have nothing to be sorry for. If you have any shred of gratitude for what I did for you, for the Preston family, then please, I'm begging you, take Mason and never show up in my life again. Chloe stood rigid, her body trembling. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice hoarse. Can we talk? Alone? Please. I sighed in resignation, unlocked the shop, and made drinks for the two kids, setting out some snacks before Chloe and I stepped outside again. The little girl is very sweet, much better behaved than Mason. Chloe began hesitantly, fidgeting. I cut her off. Just say what you came to say. My bluntness made her even more nervous. She stammered, her face flushing, before finally forcing the words out. I was just thinking, you've been on your own all these years, and it must be hard raising Joy. And Mason really looks up to you. So, maybe we could get remarried. I stared at her, my face a blank mask. I said nothing, perhaps to cover her own guilt, or perhaps because she couldn't face her own feelings. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Mason's grown up. He's felt so guilty all these years. He just wants a chance to be a good son to you. I let out a small, humorless laugh, cutting her off again. You and Dylan didn't end up getting married? He worked so hard to get back into your life, teaching an innocent kid to turn against me. And you, well, let's not rehash the past. You always loved him. I stepped aside. Didn't your perfect family get back together? Chloe still wouldn't look at me, her eyes fixed on the dark sky. He and I are in the past. It's impossible now. I interrupted her once more. You and I are in the past, too, and it's been impossible since my 28th birthday. My words made her body convulse. Tears spilled from her eyes and streamed down her cheeks. Her lips trembled. I know I hurt you, but Mason really wants you to be his father. You used to love him so much. Can't you give him a family again? Enjoy. It must be inconvenient for a single man to raise a daughter. I would treat her like my own. At that moment, looking at Chloe's face, I had the overwhelming urge to slap her. Our marriage lasted 5 years, and for 5 years, I was the only one giving anything. Even after I knew she still loved Dylan, I kept trying, loving her with a desperate humility. I always thought, people aren't made of stone. If I just held on a little longer, tried a little harder, maybe she would give me a small piece of her heart. Even a tiny crumb would have been enough. Before Dylan came back, out of a sense of duty, she had at least treated me with a basic level of respect, maintaining a semblance of civility. But the moment he reappeared, she tore it all to shreds. She ignored Mason's insults, let Dylan poison his mind against me, and threw herself back into Dylan's arms without a second thought for my feelings, crushing my love and my dignity under her heel. And now, because things with Dylan hadn't worked out, she was back, using Mason, using Joy, as an excuse to get me back. The thought made me laugh. Chloe, don't you think you're being a little hypocritical? Even now, you're hiding behind Mason. Is it so hard to just admit that you regret it? That you were wrong? After everything I did for you, after all the pain you caused me, after my parents died because of you, is a sincere apology really so much to ask for? The more I spoke, the angrier I became. The memory of my parents' accident sent me over the edge, and I was screaming at her. Finally, Chloe broke. She sank to the ground, covering her face and sobbing. Sob, I'm sorry, Leo, I was wrong. Please, just give me one chance to make it up to you. For the rest of my life, Don't bother. Let's just live our own lives from now on. I gently pulled my arm away from her outstretched hand and turned to leave, but she grabbed the corner of my jacket, refusing to let go. I didn't have to turn around to know her face was a mask of grief, despair, and desperation. I yanked my jacket free and walked away without looking back. Over my shoulder, I said softly, by the way, I have a new birthday now. It's the day I left your family. It's also the day I found Joy. That day was a new beginning for both of us. So we decided to make it our birthday. Before I could finish, Chloe completely fell apart. She ran and threw her arms around me from behind, wailing, repeating I'm sorry over and over again between sobs. I stood there silently for a long time. Finally, I turned around and gently wiped the tears from her face, just as I had done so many times before. Sigh, what's the point of all this? Don't you understand yet? Our relationship was a mistake from the very beginning. We never should have been together, and we certainly can't be together now. A rich girl from the big city and a poor kid from a small town in the mountains. Our families, our values, our entire lives. We were never a match. Before I could finish, Chloe was shaking her head violently, tears still streaming down her face. No, none of that matters. As long as we love each other, nothing else is a problem. You love me so much, and I know now that I love you too. Why can't we just be together again? I gently pushed her away, taking a few steps back. A faint smile touched my lips. Go home, Chloe. We're from two different worlds. We crossed paths by accident, but it's time for us to return to where we belong. Chloe finally left. Mason clung to my leg, refusing to let go. He was crying hysterically, his little face red and blotchy, just like when he was a toddler and I wouldn't let him play in the snow. I'm not going. I don't want to go back to that house. I want to stay with my dad. He hugged my leg, pleading, Dad, I want to be with you. I'll be good, I promise. Please don't make me go. I smiled and patted his head. Be good, kid. I'm not your dad. Go home with your mom. Ignoring his struggles, Chloe forcibly picked him up and buckled him into the car, slamming the door shut. The car started and pulled away. Through the rear window, I could see Mason pounding on the glass, his mouth open in a silent scream, his face contorted with grief. Seeing that, I felt a flicker of something, a small comfort. He wasn't my blood, but he understood gratitude. But I could never go back to being the dad who ached for half a day if he got a little scrape. I turned and saw Joy looking up at me, her expression full of sympathy. I ruffled her hair and smiled. What's up? She took my hand. Dad, it's okay to cry if you want to. I can tell you're really sad. She was right. I was a soft touch, after all. Or maybe it was because I had invested so much, loved so deeply, that even though I had let go, facing it all again still stirred the waters. I'm okay, I said, squeezing her hand. It's all over. Let's go home. As I watched Chloe's car disappear down the road, I found myself thinking of those early days, of the endless nights we spent working. I remembered one time we missed the last train home after a client meeting in another city. We had no money for a hotel, so we spent the night on a park bench. She had rested her head on my shoulder, looking up at the stars. Thank you for staying with me through all this, she'd whispered. I'm so glad you're here. At that moment, my heart was full. This was it, I thought. This was what happiness felt like, fighting for a future together. But I was naive. I mistook a single moment for a lifetime. Chloe was just a passerby in my life, one who gave me hope, then unimaginable pain, and changed me forever. And besides, we were from two different worlds. We shouldn't have been together. We couldn't be together. Not anymore. Epilogue. Chloe's story, Leo and I were finally divorced. Everyone from my son to my family was smiling. Mason was so happy he was literally bouncing off the walls. A month after the divorce, I married Dylan. The wedding was extravagant. My son was the ring bearer, and all our friends and family offered their blessings. They all said Dylan and I were the ones who were truly meant to be, that he should have been the one I married 5 years ago. After all the ups and downs, my lifelong dream had come true. I had finally married the man I loved. But I couldn't bring myself to feel happy. So much so that when the officiant asked if I would take him as my husband, I hesitated. I didn't understand what was wrong with me. 3 months into the marriage, I was still melancholic, unable to find any joy. I kept thinking about the past, about the man who was gone. "Honey, what's wrong?" Dylan complained one night, throwing back the covers. "We've been married for 3 months, and I can count the number of times you've let me touch you on one hand." I was silent for a long time, then sighed. "I'm just exhausted. I'm not in the mood." Dylan stared into my eyes, then suddenly laughed, a sarcastic sneer on his face. "Chloe, do you think I'm an idiot? It's obvious you can't forget him. It's been 3 months. You're always either staring off into space or staying at the office all night. Those are all the places he used to be, aren't they?" I said nothing. "Mom, what if I don't like Dad anymore?" My son asked me one day, pulling on my hand. His words were a shock. I stared at him, stunned, and stroked his head. "He's your biological father, sweetie. Isn't this what you always wanted? For our family to be together." He was still young and couldn't quite articulate what he was feeling. He just frowned. I don't know why. I just don't like him anymore. Before, when I wanted to play, that Dad would play with me. When I wanted cupcakes, he would go buy them for me, no matter how late it was. He used to make me crispy fried chicken and apple pie from scratch. But he is always either playing video games or getting drunk. When I ask him to play with me, he tells me to get lost. When I try to hug him, he just shoves me away and tells me I'm annoying. That day, for the first time, Mason referred to Leo as that Dad, and his eyes shone with nostalgia and admiration. "Mom, I miss that Dad," he said. "Can we go find him and bring him back?" 6 months into my marriage with Dylan, I still couldn't recapture the feeling we once had. I finally admitted to myself that what I had been in love with was the idea of him, the memory of the boy I once loved, not the man standing in front of me. But for the sake of giving my son a complete family, I tried to make the marriage work. In the end, it was no use. After 4 years, we divorced. During those 4 years, I gradually came to see my own heart clearly. The one I loved was Leo. And I also saw Dylan for who he truly was. Whether it was when we were first together, or when he abandoned me at my lowest point, or when he came back and we got married, it had always been about the money. To him, my son and I were disposable. The only thing he cared about was his lavish lifestyle. The only person he loved was himself. When our son was hospitalized with a high fever, Dylan was vacationing in Europe with his mistress. He didn't even call. He said it was just a little cold, nothing to make a fuss about, that the boy wouldn't die. When I was attacked by a business rival and lay in a coma for 8 days, he visited me once, then went right back to partying with his friends. For 4 years, he spent his days carousing, cheating, and the only thing he ever said to me was, "Honey, I'm out of cash. Give me some money." So many things over those 4 years left my son and me utterly disappointed. I couldn't imagine how the brilliant young man I once knew had become this person. The moment the divorce was final, my son told me we had to go find Leo. My heart leaped at the thought. But after 6 months of trying, my son and I failed. In that time, we both came to realize that the pain we had caused him was too deep, too immense to ever be forgiven. "Mom, is there really no way to get Dad back? I want to apologize for all the wrong things I did." As we drove out of that small town, my son was no longer throwing a tantrum. He was curled up in my arms, tear tracks on his cheeks, his voice filled with sorrow. I gently stroked his head. "Mason, I want you to remember this. No matter what happens in the future, he will always be your father. Do you understand?" "Yeah," he whispered. "I know. He's the one who gave me my life." When my son was 17, Leo got married. His bride was Joy's high school homeroom teacher. Apparently, the girl had played matchmaker. The woman was a year older than Leo, serious, and not conventionally beautiful, but you could tell at a glance that she was a kind, caring person. A perfect match for him. I kept tabs on him all those years. I had watched him from afar more times than I could count, and so many times I had wanted to run to him to try one more time. But each time, I held myself back, because I knew I didn't deserve it. I envied my son. He was a clever kid. As he got older, he started shamelessly visiting Leo, calling him Dad around the shop. Eventually, Leo couldn't say no and just accepted it. Mason even managed to get himself a spot as a groomsman at the wedding. I went to the wedding, but I didn't show my face. I stood in the crowd, watching him from a distance. The ceremony was simple, with only a few guests, but his face was radiant with happiness. I only allowed myself one look, and then I left. I was afraid that if I watched for a second longer, if I saw another woman take his arm, I would lose all control and rush up there, begging him not to marry her, not to leave me behind. Leo, you loved me so desperately, and I threw it all away. I treated you like dirt. I hurt you. Not being with you for the rest of my life is my punishment from heaven. I hope there's a next life. When that time comes, I swear I will hold onto your hand and never let go. The end.